Yeah, how are you anyway? That's what my first question
Yeah,
was.
no, I was gonna say I'm good. It's just it's just like this spiritual experience of being home this much. Like I've never been indoors this much in my entire life.
Yeah.
So
I think
ever in my life.
we briefly spoke actually a couple of months ago, like right at the beginning. You were like, I haven't been
Yeah,
outside even though I'm allowed to go outside. I've
yeah,
forgotten.
exactly. It's just because also too it's just like weird going out. So like I'm like super paranoid about passing the virus. And like other than the protest before, I was like completely not about being in crowds at all. So I'm like, if it was my grandma, I'd be pissed if people were like just going out and doing whatever they want. So I was just like, I'm gonna be a good person and not do anything. But now I'm just like, well, after the protest, I was like, well, if I don't have Corona now.
Yeah, I know, right? That's exactly how I felt. How did you feel then with there's just the difference of like staying inside and being paranoid about the virus to then this all happening, the protest happening, and then just almost like, fuck it, I'm there.
It was honestly, it was so weird. I realized that like me and Zach, my roommate and like best friend, we both realized that we did not actually process the fact that we went from Corona to revolutionaries, you could say. Did not process it at all. So like we were at the protest, me and him were just like, wait, this is fucked up. Because we were just like, we actually were sitting like on this like the stool thing, and we were looking over and we realized like usually all the like high rises in London obviously are filled with people. And we looked around, we're like, oh my God, there's no one in those. They're completely empty. And there's like thousands of people here. This is the first time we've been in a crowd since March. And we're just like, this is weird.
Yeah.
It was just weird, you know?
One extreme to the next, right?
Yeah, I know. Like my therapist, like, good luck. I meet with her tomorrow. Good luck. I have no idea what I'm gonna have to unpack with her.
Good for you for having one. Good for you for having a therapist. I mean, I know that eventually I'm probably, we all need one. We all should have one just to talk things
honestly
out.
I'm the biggest advocate for therapy, because even if you don't even have anything like you think major going on, you'll have a breakthrough on something like you buried away 20 years ago and you're just like, oh wow, I'm damaged.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I've been behaving like that in that situation.
Yeah, it's just nice. And also too, it's nice to have someone to like who's professionally trained to like listen to you complain about your life. It's really nice. So it's like a nice session every week, and it's all off your chest. I love it.
Is it every week that you do it?
Yeah, try to every week. Unless it's like I'm really busy or I'm just having like a bad week, I don't do it, but I try to do it as much as possible because it keeps me in a good headspace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done you.
Yeah. I mean, it took me years to get here, like years. This is new. Yeah. So, like,
the barrier that I have with therapy is I don't want, and I think this is probably the same for a lot of people, I don't want to know. I know I don't want to be told. I know that I think therapy is a lot of they're listening to you rather than actually giving you answers or explanations to things, if I'm correct. But I don't want to, it's enough for me now to actually have opened up to some of my friends about some of my things that I've never ever spoken about. Like I'm so open on Instagram, but they're still, I think everyone thinks they know me through Instagram because I am very open. But there is still another side to me that nobody knows about. And that's the stuff that only a couple of my friends really I've had deep conversations about. And I think it's now that I've had that, it's the next step of opening up to a professional, because I think it's the same for everyone, that shit, the judgments, the vulnerability, all of it. And do I really want to know what I have to do? It's like I don't want to have to take action on it, I guess, maybe.
No, you're completely right. It's fucked up because you generally like, I mean, for the first like year or so, you don't like it. Like at least I didn't enjoy it at all. I don't like, it's not always fun to have like to realize the things that you need to work on and realize the things that because you realize you're kind of your own worst enemy a lot of the times, at least for myself. And so it's really hard to realize, like for me, learning how responsible I am for my own problems is hard for me to accept. So it's like, at least for me, it's like, because you think like, oh gee, they did this to me, I did this to me, but you forget that like a lot of the times it does take two to create issues and how you respond to them. And I'm in denial about a lot of that. So
that's interesting. Are you in a relationship?
No. I'm single. Single.
Thank God. The only reason I say that is because I realized, like, coming out of a long-term relationship, I realized how much I would put blame on the other person rather than, and I wouldn't know about it. And then only now, being single for so long, I understand that it's my problem. Like if I've done something, it's a reflection of me and it's my fault.
Yeah.
And that was like a big barrier for me. As soon as you start accepting that, you can just move on to the next thing, which I guess therapy is, that's why it's there for, so you can keep on moving on.
Yeah, my therapist told me, she was like, who you date says more about you than them. So she's like, they're a reflection of the things that you are missing in your life. And when you have terrible exes, that's like, it's really hard to hear that. So like, so I was just like, I'm the reason that they sucked. You know, because that's the truth though. Like the signs are there, and I just ignored them. And this is more about me than it does about them. And so, yeah, trust me, when you get to that point,
I never thought about. Well, I think I've listened to a lot of Jay Shetty's podcast. Do you ever listen to him? No? Jay Shetty.
No, I'll write his name down.
He is fantastic, and he does a lot on. He was a monk for like. I mean, he's from London, then became a monk for like however long, and now he's just this.
I love Buddhism.
Educator, motivator, all of the above, and he goes a lot into relationships. And what you've just said is a topic that he's spoken about before.
Yeah, that's hard to accept. Like I worked on because I was in a relationship last winter, but we broke up in like late January. And that's when I like started talking, because before then I avoided my relationships in therapy. I just did not talk about them. I talked about like my other family issues or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I brought up that for the first time. She was just like, yeah, I've been waiting for this. And I was like, oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was terrible. It's like obviously it's healthy to do it, but it's not. It does not feel good. It's very painful. But I mean, I feel a lot better. I'm the most confident I've been because of it. But
yeah. Just goes to show the more you've gone out of your comfort zone, and you've been able to bring something bigger out of that by doing it. Right?
Yeah.
Another example of it. Oh, well, one day, maybe this year, my friend last year was like, I think maybe you should look into therapy. And I did say, okay, next year, 2020 might be the year I do it. And I mean, look what's happened. So.
True. I mean, if anyone should start therapy, it should be this year. Because
I think that's a profession that is going to be profiting majorly.
Yeah, no, I use BetterHelp as well, because it's also, you can text your therapist. It's really nice. And so like I've been texting her also, because you can like, it's not just because some therapists do where they just do video calls, some do texting as well. Because I'm really picky with therapists. I wanted someone like, because I've been through a lot of bad therapists. So I wanted like a therapist who like I could pick every single detail about them, and then have someone who fit my full criteria. Yeah. And so, and also quite affordable as well, and gives you a lot of options of like, if you want to do video calls or like texting or just like chatting, it's quite flexible. So
that's pretty good. What did you say? It's called Better Health.
Yeah, BetterHelp.
BetterHelp.
Yeah, I would look into it, because like also too, I'm not like religious personally, and I would not, because I wouldn't want a religious therapist. I won't, like, there's certain things I would just need, advice, because there's every therapist, they're still human beings, and human beings have their biases whether they try to or not. Yeah. So I would try to find someone who's like, who looks like you, would also be nice. Someone who, also has your beliefs, your core beliefs, because I find that when they don't have those things, like I had a white male therapist who was a Catholic, and that went terrible. Terrible.
Trying to convert you halfway through the session.
So bad. It went so bad. It was like 1 month, and I was like, this is not for me.
No. It's that compatibility, right? Like you need someone.
Yeah, it's like finding your. It's a relationship, and plus it's like I think like personal training, you would get it. You have to have some kind of relationship with somebody if you're going to be helping them grow, and like it's a vulnerable thing. And so make sure they're someone you can.
And it doesn't mean there's necessarily anything wrong with them, like you said. It's the relationship that you're searching for.
Yeah, exactly. The connection there.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Okay, so. Well, last week. So the reason that we're obviously having this conversation is the message that you sent back to me over, obviously social media was insane. Last week it still is. But I think Blackout Tuesday was, even though it was like bam, it was just like wake up on Tuesday and like, what is going on? And there was this whole movement happening over social media. And before that, I'll own up to thinking, okay, there's been another death. It's shit. This shouldn't be happening, but it was another one. It was in the same category as another bombing, you know, like shit happens in the world and it's like it's still happening, but I feel I'm voiceless. So I'm going to watch the video, I'm going to process it, think about it, probably for, let's be honest, I think 5-10 minutes. And if this has been something that's happened outside of a pandemic where we didn't have time and we were working, then I question whether this movement would have been as big as it is now.
No, I agree.
I was able to sit on it for so much longer.
No, I 100% agree. Especially like I said to you over messaging, like since 2015, like I've been involved in Black Lives Matter because it started because it started the Black feminist movement in the United States.
Okay.
And the hardest part of like advocating and like getting people involved was because people were so distracted. Like they would care for like a week or two and then over their heads, you know what I mean? Because like, oh, I have work, I have, you know, fun, I have a weekend going out with my friends and all these other distractions. And for the Black community, like it never ended. Like this is something like that has always been going on. Like I see Black Lives Matter, like that tag almost every day, whether there was a pandemic or not. But it was the first time that I saw other people paying attention to it, which I found really nice. Cause I was like, wow, okay, here we go. Like finally. And I think in the United States, it's especially important because we were dealing with Corona, and Corona has disproportionately killed Black people. It's been terrible. Like Black people and Native Americans are being wiped out like crazy right now over Corona because of all the systematic issues and cultural issues. And so like, and I posted, and I don't know if you remember, I posted on my story about how essential workers aren't heroes, they're slaves. because like majority of essential workers like and low-income jobs in the United States are held by people of color, especially Black people. And so when you have to like, not only are the communities dying because Corona is more likely to spread because they can't quarantine in large homes, I mean in small homes because there's a lot of people living in these homes, but they also have to go to work. So almost every single Black family in the United States has no option to stay at home and work from home at all. It's a majority white thing. And so that kind of reinforces the fact that like it was just a really, really struggling time. And then there's also a huge issue with homelessness in the United States. Majority of homeless people are Black. And so when you are homeless, you pass things around, and then people who are mentally ill also don't understand viruses, like understand the necessity of viruses, and you're able to kind of take mental ill people and take people who are older, people who have special needs, like are completely ignored in the United States. And so like I have friends who have like broken homes who go to university, for example, right? And they live at their university, but when universities close, where do they go? You know what I mean? And so like a lot of the Corona passing was due to like people having to like house jump as well because they didn't have solid homes. And so it was just kind of this really insidious cycle. And so the Black community during Corona in the United States was really, really affected. And like in Black Lives Matter, before this, before it became more global, more of on the global center stage, was already talking about this, how messed up it is right now. Like I would recommend looking at PBS NewsHour. They release their news every single day the next day. And they, like, if you look at all of their news from like March and April, especially like early April, is really, really telling. They have a lot of like stories of Black experiences, and they give Black people a chance to like explain their situation. And so I think that mixed with just like Donald Trump and the leadership in the United States kind of reignited it, and then having it here, especially at the same time with Boris Johnson, and then I think everyone being home as well, just kind of I think allowed it to be where it is now, I think.
Yeah. And even with we know that eventually we're going to be back to somewhat normal, and by normal I mean going back to work, and the majority of us working again.
The new normal.
Yeah, exactly. I think that I hope that at least the movement that's happened over the last 2 weeks, because it's been in our face every day, that we've taken the time to follow hashtags, we've taken the time to follow new accounts, whereas before we weren't doing that. So hopefully that will help keep reminding people. It's the same as like similar to mental health, right? It's spoken about, but only until like it's out in the media do people start taking the time to follow the right accounts, so that we can try and remind ourselves to keep like this is still happening, rather than pushing it to the side. Like this video, for example, I'd like to put it out not now, but in like 2 weeks time, to like remind people these conversations still need to carry on happening about how important communication is going to be during this, like communication through mental health, and now communication within our friends that are of different color, whether it's white, black, brown, and how important it is on how we approach the subject, which is where, so that the post that I'd reposted, for people that had for people that don't know, the post was about, because when this had started and the Blackout Tuesday was happening, like a lot of these trends, we'll call it a trend just for the sake of lack of a better word.
No, I think trends are appropriate. I think trends.
Yeah, trends. Okay, awesome. We'll go with trend. That people were following it, and for the people that don't get me wrong, of course, people they jump on trends. They're doing it just to showcase that moment and highlight their profile or whatever it may be. But for the people that actually care, it's something that we know that this is minimal. This is a minor thing that needs to happen. But in the back of my mind, I knew it's only going to take a certain amount of time for someone to jump on this and say, this isn't enough. Like, this is minor compared to what needs to be happening. And I knew that was going to happen. So when I think on the Wednesday or the Thursday, when that came out, and there were messages to say that it's not enough to be posting the black square, this isn't enough, like you need to be doing this and that. I completely understand that, and I completely agree with that, but it's a movement. There's step by step by step in everything in life, and that should have been a minor step for people to be able to move on to the next step. So that was where the whole communication side of things, I felt, is very important, so that
I'm just writing notes, by the way, on my phone.
So for the general population, myself included, for people that aren't as like emotionally aware, it's very easy for someone to say something to someone and then react, because we're humans at the end of the day and we want to protect our ego. So that is why a lot of like just quick reactions and arguments happen, because we're protecting our ego rather than actually like wanting to hear the other person's verdict of it. So for something like that, I think it was for a lot of people, I think I was trying, like I haven't done anything all these years, but this was my time to like at least try and be a part of the movement. But then to have someone say, that's not enough, you need to be doing this and that instead. It's like I knew that in the beginning, but let me get to that step. Let me have this, then that, then do that, and then have that as like the larger picture. So that was where my biggest thing was. It was like the communication just really needs to be really important now, to make sure that people stay on the same page. Like, because we're trying to do this all together, right? So yeah, that was my view on that. So go for it.
I would 100% agree that there was a proportion of allies, and I wouldn't even say black allies, I would say non-black allies, who felt a need to be overly critical of black squares. I do, because even this, I will even tell you, me and Zach this morning, when I posted my black square in the morning, as you know, and Zach did not post his, and he posted a critique of the black square that morning, and so a lot of our friends were very confused. And so I think the conversation kind of starts on what the black square does. Why is it important? So the first thing I think we need to talk about is understanding the violence of the black community. So the black community is violated not just directly, so not just by guns, not just by police standing on our necks, but also by attitudes, perceptions, and norms, which is understood as cultural violence. And it's also systematic violence through systems. So like the idea that, for George Floyd, for example, George Floyd was dead before he walked into that store, because he was dead because there is a conception that black men are untrustworthy, they're thieves, right? And so the clerks already had that idea in their minds, because they've never been checked before, right? It doesn't need to be visible, because it's normal to have those views. And then when she called the police assuming his check was bad, obviously the police officers use direct violence toward him, and the video shows that. But then the systematic violence happened when he was not arrested, when the police officers, it took riots for him to be arrested. And so whenever we talk about activism, we need to talk about what kind of violence are we trying to approach at that point. All three types of violence? Is it just cultural violence we're addressing with? Is it systematic violence? Or is it direct violence, right? So when we talk about police officers using cameras, that's when we protest for those things, we're protesting to address that type of direct violence for the Black community. But when it comes to black squares are a way of dismantling cultural violence toward Black people. And so Black squares are important for first visibility. And as you know, on my Instagram, I preach about how important visibility is, because we live in a world where Black people are not worthy to be seen. So when you are Black, for example, I'm a Black woman. There's a huge stereotype that Black women are always angry. I'm always frustrated. Any idea I have that is not considered, that is not a white masculine idea, is automatically lesser than or less valued. And in order for my ideas or thoughts to be legitimized, I need a white male counterpart to do so, for me not to have any grief, right? And so Black squares are important because they show that they allow our allies, our white counterparts particularly, to put our problems and our issues on center stage for the first time, you know? And so this is the first time that not only that non-Black people are being treated like Black people. So when you post a Black square, the critiques you're getting, the people that first attack, that's what happens to Black people. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So when you're Black, we always have to be very, very cautious. Like, how do I come off? What am I saying? You know, is this person going to view me as a threat? Is this person going to view me as disrespectful? Is this person going to view me as lesser than because of the way I look or the way I talk or my passport, you know? And so I think a lot of the critiques, yes, while I recognize that allies, like I said, were being, and I would agree, to some extent overcritical, the response from allies failed in the sense of not being like, just saying, okay, I see what you're saying. This will not end here. This is my job. You see what I'm saying? So I think both sides messed up in being overcritical, but the allies messed up understanding what it means to be an ally. Because when you're Black, for example, like this last week, I've received the most harassment I've ever received in my life. Because I'm very political. I've always, like, I studied politics. My first degree is in politics. I study hydrogeology, politics, very minimal type of, you know, politics and enfranchisement of Black community, because there are almost no Black women in any of the fields that I work in. And majority of the people who are most affected by these issues look like me. So, and I'm constantly getting harassment for that, but that's usually my professional life. But this is the first time I've been at this point in my time. When I was younger, yes, but right now that I've been open about these ideas on my platform. And before Blackout Tuesday, harassment. Every time I post something, even when I posted that picture of me saying, you know, kindness is my weapon of choice, because at that point I had to make a decision, you know what, I have to just accept this angry Black girl stereotype, because no matter what I say, if it comes off impassionate, I'm going to be angry. Even if I'm super, super kind, if it's not nice, it's going to be angry. So I think a lot of the discomfort was coming from the first time I think non-Black people just felt what it's like to be Black. Because when you post that Black square, you are showing solidarity with the Black community. And so at that point, you become a part of that community. You're not a Black person, but you start to take, because when you start dismantling that cultural violence, you start taking away from us, and it starts being, you know, just dispersed to other people. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that is where a lot of it happened. And I think a lot of people misunderstand what it means to be an ally, because the whole point is to, like I said, again, dismantle these three types of violence that Black people experience. And so part of that is getting criticized for your voice to a really unfair extent, because I admit a lot of the critiques are unfair, but the Black experience is almost always unfair. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of hard for me to see people and also too, I admit your post was like one of like 15 I commented on, because it was just constant like, well, I'm doing my best, and well, I don't want people, and like the phrase of I don't want people to feel like they can't do anything. And that's a part of the thing that I had the most problem with, because when you say that you're afraid to isolate allies, it's based on the presumption that an ally can stop doing their job because they feel uncomfortable. And that's not fair. You see what I'm saying? Because discomfort is completely, it has to happen in order for Black liberation to happen, you know? And so I really, that's why I wanted to take it down, not because of, I think that that it was necessarily that it's wrong to feel sad about it. Because I mean, it'd be weird if white people weren't sad who are allies. Like, you guys should be sad because for the first time you're realizing, you know, how fucked up the world is. So yeah, it hurts. But I just don't like, I just can't stand for having the idea that allies are, that because they are discomfort, that's enough for them not to do their job, you know? Like, I had a conversation with a friend, no longer a friend actually. And he was like, well, a white man. And he said to me, he was like, well, I just don't want to come off disingenuous and I feel powerless. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And I told him, I was like, well, that's your responsibility as an ally. That's the job. Like, in order to break down cultural violence, like, it's hard for Black people because we didn't set these norms. These norms are put onto us. We know how to survive them. If we are alive now, we have managed to survive them, but we are not the ones who have created them. You know what I mean? We don't, because at the end of the day, we aren't white. We can't speak for whiteness. We can speak for Blackness and how we feel toward whiteness, but we can't tell you what it's like to be white. So I think that's why the whole idea that, like, the narrative of, you know, it's not your Black friend's job to help you know how to talk. That's what that comes from. It comes from this idea that, you know, we have to survive. You know, we have to deal with the trauma of our oppression, also work on trying to survive it at the same time, and also exist and operate in masculine white spaces all the time, you know. And I say masculine white spaces because I also recognize that feminine white women do have a struggle there as well, that they are women. So, you know, I say that because white men have the most responsibility, because the spaces by which, you know, of knowledge creation or any kind of power or anything really are operated mostly by white men. You see what I'm saying? So it takes a lot of discomfort, because that's discomforting for us. I mean, imagine how for me, almost all of my classes, I'm the only Black girl in all my classes and everything, because it means either I live in all Black areas, but all Black areas are low income, I have less opportunity. So, and my mom's half Hispanic, and so it's worse for her. She's like half Mexican, you know, and she's from the South. It's not a good mix when it comes to racism. And so she was like, you know, I have to move my kids out to white spaces with her last husband. And so it's uncomfortable, but imagine how uncomfortable it is for Black people to have to operate in all white spaces. You know what I mean? So it's like, I have a good understanding of whiteness, but I am not white. You know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm really glad that it's cleared a few things up for me, definitely, with what you've just spoken about. And I actually, right now in this moment, I want to say that I agree with a lot of what you've just said in regards to the post and the reason why, like, you spoke up about it. The couple of questions that I do have, like, from what you've just said, how do you think we're to get over the stereotype? So when you spoke about, like, Black women are, the stereotype is that they're angry, frustrated. How do we move on from those stereotypes?
We move on from the stereotypes by there's many ways. I think, for example, with me being the angry Black girl in class, which is something I've dealt with a lot, the two things that have helped the most are, one, my white counterparts legitimizing my ideas, and also, but not just legitimizing the idea, but also reinforcing the need why they had to legitimize it. You see, so like in high school, I had friends, I would say things, and mind you, I'm top of my class. Like, I am always top 10 of my class all the time, yet I am the last person to be called on. I have to fight for any kind of position of anything in any groups that I work in, even though I overperform all of my white male peers since I was born.
Did you know this at the time, or do you only know this by looking back on it? Like, at the time that this happened, did you think this is happening because of my color of skin, or only now that you are aware so much more of the prejudices, is that the right word, of the discrimination or the social injustice? Is that the right term to use?
I think it's a mix, because, like, there's, I mean, you know, because I think every Black person can tell you that there's a moment when you realize you're Black,
Okay.
And there's a moment, like the same way there's a moment you realize when you're a woman. You realize at one point you're like, fuck, I'm a girl. Like these things are different for me. You know what I mean? Everyone has a black moment. And mine was when I lived in Japan for 2 years. My mom's ex-husband moved us there for his job. And I remember I was like, holy crap, I'm black. And I was like, oh my, I'm the only black. And I was looking around, I was like, oh, okay, everyone's going to be Asian. And there was a lot of white people and a lot of Asian people. And I was like, well, this is very diverse. But I was like, there's no black people, you know? And like having sleepovers, like you start realizing you're black. So like, and then just having people talk over you or not think that, you know, or just you'll say something and then everyone will be like, I don't know. And then someone else, a white man particularly, will say the same exact thing. But because certain ideas are more palatable on in particular bodies, you know? So I think it's a mixture of both. I think with university and with school, I learned the particular terms, right? And I learned why it happens and how it happens. But that it is happening, I think you kind of know early on. I think you just don't really know what you call it. Because like, for example, feminism, when I was 12, I didn't know what feminism was, but I could tell that I knew I was a girl, you know?
Yeah. And I think that goes to, I can't quite remember what you'd said now, but I've written down understanding terms. I think a lot of, see, when you mentioned allyship during like the putting the black squares on Instagram, I think we didn't understand the terms back then. I wish I'd written down what you'd said specifically for me to build a question on that.
I would say it would just be like with the black squares. So when we talk about cultural violence, for me, the most insidious cultural violence that I deal with as a black person, because I'm a black American person, and almost all the popular culture in the entire world that's mainstream comes from black America. Like all vernacular, like it's so funny. I always say that it's like, I don't know what terms are popular until I hear my non-black friends say them. That's when I know that, oh, this word is popular, like on fleek or like those things like that. Like, or like it's lit. Like like those things, all of my black friends and cohorts and family have always been saying. Like, I don't remember times when we weren't saying them, but my signifier for coolness or that I can take this out of a black space now. This is allowed to be in a white space. This is okay now. This isn't seen as something derogatory, is when my white counterparts say it. And so to be in just our clothes, like athleisure comes from black Americans as well. Like, and they just retermed it athleisure. Like the term athleisure annoys the hell out of me. I'm not even gonna lie.
Define it, please.
Athleisure is just like when you wear like athletic clothes.
Athleisure.
Athleisure, yeah, exactly. But all early hip hop artists have always been doing that. Like that was just being black. That was just blackness. It's like we found a way to take black things and take them from us. You know, even though we've been so oppressed and we get nothing, we can't benefit from these things today. But then white people see them, take them from us, which is why cultural appropriation is very important. Because it's not just about the hurt that it feels that, oh, we don't get to take, we have the things that we have are taken. The pain really lies in the fact that the things we have are taken, but it erases blackness. Because when you take black bodies, black people cannot be like Kim Kardashian, for example. Everyone's like, Kim Kardashian brought the curvy body back, and it's like, no, it was always there. My whole family, like that's what I was like. Growing up, I was panicked that I would not be curvy. That was my biggest fear. I was like, oh my gosh, like, please give me tits, please give me ass, like God, please. Like I needed that because that's in my family. Like if I go, like when I'm in London for too long, I go home. Everyone's like, do you eat? Are they starving you there? Because it's when you're really thin, that's a white standard of beauty. For blackness, that is not something that is. You don't want to be skinny when you go to the cookout. Okay? You don't want to be skinny with your family homes. And so it's really frustrating to see that like people can take us, people can take our music, our style, our body, literally our bodies, the shape of our body, what we find is beautiful, our hairstyles, everything, our language, take that and be very visible in how they consume us. So they cannot be visible in the same way when it comes to standing up for our right to survive. You know what I mean? And that's especially hard, especially because a lot of like black artists, like we get paid less. We get undervalued to our white counterparts. Like Kim Kardashian made her whole career by taking blackness. and asserting herself into Black spaces. But imagine all the Black women who came before her. There's thousands of Black women who are like Kim Kardashian who could never get there. And I use her because she's a very, very good example of how of a very, very good, she's very smart in her use of Blackness, because she knew how to make it more palatable for whiteness. But then people can't do the same. People, I don't want to come disingenuous when it comes to, posting a square, but people don't feel disingenuous by posting our music or doing dance challenges or wearing our clothes, so it's painful. It's quite painful.
Yeah, it's painful when you see all of that taken away from your culture, but then as soon as a movement or the topic of race is spoken about and they're not there to then voice their opinion, that's what's damaging. That's what's hurtful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's also just like when it comes to just not people just when you take also to not even asking, like, is this okay? Like, even if someone were to just ask us, hey, how do you feel about us taking this from you? You know what I mean? Because like also too, in context, Black people, we have never had a chance to really choose our own fate. We survive it. We get circumstances to survive it. And so when it comes to BLM, especially too, I'm really a huge advocate on, and I tell all my Black counterparts, I think they should be very vocal on what they want and how they feel on everything, and be okay with being wrong, because we have normalized Black people not being able to make mistakes, not being able to call out people, like holding your tongue and learning how to operate through whiteness. I'm like, if we're going to be liberated, we have to be as comfortable as a white person is to critique something that they don't like. You know what I mean? So I think when it comes to this movement, I think it's really important, which is why I took the time out to talk to you. I think it's like anyone who's willing to hear a Black perspective and let that inform them, instead of white people deciding, okay, this is anti-Black or this is okay, is really, really rare, and also really, really important, because that's why I keep saying I keep losing friends, because I'm at a place where I'm not really willing to, when it comes to the Black experience, there can be no discussion. There, white feelings have no place there. You don't really get to have an opinion on how Black people feel on their own oppression, how they deal with it, which is another reason why I'm not a huge fan of people critiquing the riots or critiquing the violence, because even if Black people are being violent, if they're wrong, it's like, how can we really judge? How can people who have not experienced that oppression judge how those deal with that oppression? Because, for example, I'm not going to judge a rape victim on how she deals with her rape. I'm not. That's not my place. I'm not going to judge any other assault victim. But when it comes to Black people, everyone feels really comfortable telling us how we should feel about how we deal with our oppression. You know what I mean? I've been called aggressive and mean. I've been called a bully. I've been called a bully so many times, and I'm not a bully at all. I'm not a bully at all. But I think it's when I'm just unapologetic on holding people accountable at this point, because I realize I holding my tongue and just allowing people to say racist things. Like, every single day, it's like, what racist thing am I going to allow today? What racist thing am I not going to allow today? Yeah. And I'm at this point where I'm not allowing any racism, anything. Like, I'm going to say anything, so it's, for some people, might seem more militant, but it's just for the first time, I think Black people are just like, you know what, this is the first time we can ever just say how we feel for real. And I think we're just saying it 100% explicitly, which is hard for a lot of people to take in, which is why I took the time out for you, because I give you the credit of, it's rare. Your response to me was very rare, because that has not been the norm by any means.
You've had people, so what's the response been? It's been a very protective,
very disrespectful,
egotistical protection.
Yes,
response.
In a disrespectful way, because especially I had the situation with this one girl, which is why I exposed her. Because I think I reached out to almost every white person I know, even in the most casual sense. And I would pretty much ask them, where do you stand on BLM? Why, yes or no? And if you can't get it together, please exit my life. I don't have I'm at this point, I don't have the time to educate you. If you're open to hearing things, cool. We can do this. We can do the work. But if you want to argue with me about the legitimacy of my oppression, you're done. You're done. Yeah. And so there's a lot of people who, and especially too, the funniest thing is people would come back to me and be disrespectful to me using Black vernacular. They would come at Black vernacular, so Black phrases, so on fleek, trust. Like, and like where I'm from, like you don't tell a black, like this one girl told me, she was like, trust, I know what I'm doing. And like telling a black girl from where I'm from, trust, are fighting words, you know. And it's so funny because I'm like, you don't even know what you're saying, because if you knew what that word meant, you wouldn't have said it, because you don't want to fight me, you know what I mean? So it's just like, and it's like this double disrespect that people would use, like they're so, it's so white supremacy is very, 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 very like entrenched in everything we do, that people would be disrespectful to me using blackness as a weapon to tell my oppression didn't exist. You know?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think like my opinion on that, it goes back to the communication side of everything. And I think the first thing people need to start doing in every aspect of their life is looking inside themselves. And it goes back to reflecting on, am I responding to this because I'm protecting my ego, or am I responding to this because I'm passionate about it? Does that make sense? There are two very, so for the girl that you've now lost as a friend, I assume that was very much a protection of her ego. That was her response.
Yeah, I would agree.
Whereas I would like to say that I'm educated enough, or I've taken the time to understand our emotions, that I'm able to sit back on it and say, we need to have an open mind. It goes back to the closed-minded, open-mindedness of it. So how do you feel? Because obviously there's so much emotion at the moment, and I'm sure I assume it feels like you've now finally got this voice, which you should have always been able to have had. But right now you've got this voice because everyone is so honed in on what's happening at the moment, that there's a lot of passion coming out in what you're probably saying. So do you think, because I'm sure you probably think, well, no, I want to be able to approach this however I want to because of all the oppression that I've had in the past. But do you think there's a fine line of perhaps wording or taking the time to educate someone a little bit further, rather than perhaps maybe using caps lock letters, because like I said, people can go so defensive over that, because I wish years ago, when I'd first had the white privilege card thrown at me, I wish the guys that had done it had taken the time to educate me on what white privilege was, because ever since I had that, I had a very negative connotation towards the word. So I was too worried about ever speaking up about race, because I didn't feel like I had a foot to stand on, which is very wrong because of this, like the privilege that I understand what it to be. I just wish I'd been educated in the right way. I wish someone had sat me down and talked to me like we are right now, rather than it getting too far into so many years later and only now having this conversation. So how do you feel about the communication aspect of this right now?
I feel that if the person who is addressing your white privilege is white, they have a responsibility to educate you 100%. Because like I say, white privilege is a white person's issue. We didn't create white privilege, so it's not our job to dismantle it. It's a white person's job. Okay. And I think at this point, the great about this movement is that not every single person can really sit back and think, what can I do now to not be racist? And what I say is, when you have an interaction with a person of color, whether even if they're not Black, any person of color or any marginalized community for that matter, and they say to you, this interaction has made me feel more oppressed. Your job at that point is to educate yourself outside of that, because obviously, especially when the conversations go badly, I think people fail to realize that anger is generally just masked pain a lot of the time. And so I think because of the trauma that person's dealing with, whether they're LGBT plus, female, Muslim, whatever, Black, that's just pain. And I don't think that person who is most likely in pain or has dealt with pain with that oppression has to be nice or kind or anything. Because at that point, if you've offended an oppressed group, they don't owe you anything. You know, at that point, they don't owe you anything. And so, for example, for me, I'll be really real. I mean, obviously I'm Black, but I did not understand Islam at all. Like that was my weakness as a person who wanted to do social justice. And I remember my first year of my uni degree, and I think I'm hot shit. I'm like, I really love, I care, like I'm so open-minded, I'm amazing, I'm all about this life, and I got my ass handed to me by a Muslim friend. We were talking about feminism, and I had really, really problematic views, and I assumed a lot of things that I didn't know based on my own experience that were completely wrong. And she told me about myself in front of everyone in class, and it sucked. It totally sucked. I cried, not in class, but like in the bathroom when no one was around. I cried a little bit, dropped some tears, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm a terrible person. What am I gonna do? And I sulked and I called my mom, like I always do, call my mother, and she was just like, stop crying. She's like, you were wrong. She's like, suck it up. I know that you feel bad, but she's like crying, and she said, feeling bad isn't going to do anything. She said, do you care if white people feel bad? Has it ever helped you? And I was like, no. She was like, then how are you going to help your friend? And so I went to seminars. Like honestly, the Marxism Festival had this amazing black Muslim feminist seminar on how Muslim women feel from all sides of the aisle, whether they wear hijab, women who don't, women who are non-religious, like who have rejected the religion. Why? A very good panel of intelligent women who talk openly and explicitly about all of their problems and the whole, like, a lot of knowledge. And it was amazing. I learned so much, but it was a long process getting there. My friend, like later on, I told her, and at the end of the class, I told her, I was like, you know what? I apologize to you immediately, but I will work on this. I said, I will work on this to my best of my ability. And I will educate myself more. And when I'm more educated, I will come to you and talk to you about it. And she was really open, she was really open to hearing that. And, in that moment, it also made me, because like also think Black people, we forget, like, yes, right now we're talking about Black lives. So we all know that we have more going on in the world as well. We have Jewish lives, we have Palestinian lives, we have Muslim lives who, and all kinds of lives that need to be also addressed. Right now we're talking about Black lives. So it's important for us as Black people as well to remember as well that we have this responsibility too to our other oppressed brothers and sisters, not just ourselves. And so that's how I handled it at that time, because like, and it's painful. But if the person who's checking back to the point of your white privilege is white, I do thing at that point, because my friend Zach as well, him and I had a conversation about this. He's a white gay male, and I send people to him. Like if it gets to the point where someone's like, I don't understand something, and it's like a really long, really drawn out question, and I'm just not in the mood. I'm like, Zach will help you out. I give him Zach's number. I'm like, he would love to have this conversation with you. And then that's what I do. I hand them off to my white friends all the time. But I think we help. I think that's the best way to handle it. Because I think the pain, because the thing is too, people who are oppressed also too, gaslighting, are constantly gaslighted that their feelings aren't legitimate all the time, always, right? Throughout the entire society. So like, for example, like the idea that, well, everyone thinks Black people are equal to beautiful to white women, but it's like, but then you go to Google and you Google beautiful woman, there's not a Black woman in sight. Or that fact that I'm usually the darkest shade of makeup you can find at any beauty store. There's almost never a darker shade than me. I'm what people consider the darkest you can be, like in most places, like Black, because how many famous Black women do you know who are singers or performers or artists who have skin darker than mine? Very few. Majority of them are on the lighter side of skin because that's more palatable. So like, but we have been gaslighted to think that, no, we love all people, everyone's equal, freedom for all, but that doesn't exist. So I think especially when you're dealing with, when someone calls you on their privilege, like I was called on my inability to understand Muslim feminism. I can't, that she came to me in pain because she was not nice to me at all. Like, yes, she tore into my ass, maybe very clear, like badly. But then at the time I was like, that was harsh, but I was like, no, it wasn't harsh. That was her pain. She was in pain because that was a pain. It was painful for her to have to hear again especially from someone she trusted or someone she saw as a friend, disregard something that has been so traumatic for her. Whether that person who's coming to you realizes it or not, that's what it is. It's just trauma and pain,
Yeah. I think there's a circle coming back to like what we spoke about at the beginning with your therapist and the whole blaming. and accepting that this is what I have to do right now because of the amount of hurt that's been built up within a community, within a race. And it's now my job to take it into my own hands, to do the education and to have the conversation. So I completely agree. And I can only hope that the more these conversations are out there, it's less about, that's how the movement can happen. That's where the uncomfortableness becomes comfortable. As long as you're completely right, you have to be uncomfortable. And as much as it hits your pride and it hits your heart and whatnot, it's important to have, because we can't expect. So for example, I'll relate it to being a personal trainer. I should not be your motivator. I'm here to stand for what I am and what I what's the word's gone from my mind,
like the skills you can offer to that person.
So for what I stand for what I promote, that's who I am. The motivation has to come from within you. I can hold you accountable, but I cannot be your motivator, because you've got to find that within yourself in order for you to carry on progressing and to get to the level that you want to.
No, I totally agree. And I think, speaking of accountability as well, South Africa, they had this, they dealt with their segregation. So their history of segregation is very similar to that of the United States. And after apartheid ended, instead of just ending things and creating a system and ignoring what happened, right? They had these talks where Black people were able to and white people had to sit, and they were forced to have these really uncomfortable conversations about everything that happened. And it was terrible at the time. Yes, it was very painful. And I recommend you watching them, because it's a very, very telling experience. I read it in, I had to watch them for Peace and Conflict, one of my university courses. And and it was really, really, because watching it, you're like, how is this? When I first watched it, I was like, how could this help anybody? Because I was like, this is dark. I was like, this is actually you having to look in the eyes of people who have hurt you. And like a lot of, so even like some rape trauma, therapists even have where, like, instead of having the rapist, because some people are like, I don't actually want to go to trial because it's so painful and nothing would happen. They have it where you would talk to your rapist and you would just talk about why that happened. And I'm like, how that worked. But what happens is later on, if you notice, I have a lot of South African friends, white and Black, and they're all, although people can be racist and have racist things, the one thing that I always found interesting is that they're very comfortable in talking about race. At this point now, talking about race and talking about what happened, talking, like, for example, like in America, if you bring up slavery, the dinner, like, everyone's leaving dinner party, you know what I mean? But in South Africa, you're able to talk about, that was fucked up, that was dark, that was weird, how is that still affecting us now? And really everyone feels comfortable and normalize that conversation now that they're kids now, and their kids' don't have that negative connotation with ego, like you said earlier, with having that conversation, because they realize it's not about me. It's about me, a person in a system that's perpetuating some evils that I didn't create, but I can benefit from if I'm not cognizant of it,
Yeah.
I think that would be really great as well. And I think with this liberation movement as well, like, I've been talking to a lot of friends that has to happen. Like, we have to be able to, like, ingrain, because it's the cultural violence that is, like, and I always stress that's never addressed. Systematic violence is rarely, sometimes addressed, like, regulations and laws, but that cultural violence, attitudes, opinions, thoughts, which is why I think we're still here now. And, like, I don't, because although I respect Dr. King and I respect, a lot of what he did, a lot of critiques of him, like even to Malcolm X, like before he died, he even apologized to Malcolm X for a lot of the critiques he gave to him, because he wasn't really, he was culturally important, but he minimized that cultural violence in some ways. That wasn't okay, because, you know what I mean? He's like, it didn't actually deal with the norms and ideas and attitudes and opinions to the extent it should have,
Yeah.
And it made, and he when other Black leaders like Angela Davis would be more militant, like what he would call as militant about it, he would reject that. And so he also, like, sometimes in the Black communities happens as well. We think that we have to, talk about our issues in a way that in a white way, because white people talk about their problems in a very different way, but white people's problems have existed, operate, or manifested in very different ways. So those ways may be appropriate for you guys, but for us, maybe not. You know what I mean? And so I think those conversations, like, just as much as possible, are just calling out any microaggressions which are culturally violent, because you can just automatically break that norm. For every single person in that room or that vicinity who can hear that conversation, that norm has been flagged.
Yeah.
And so then they'll be more cautious about how they deal with the next Black person in their next, like, you know, interaction.
Yeah. You got to go deep in order to be able to move on, right? And everything, like
your
therapy as well, like
I honestly think the cultural violence is the most important part, because I would even argue, in my opinion, and I've argued in my research, that I think cultural violence is where it starts. I don't think it starts systematically, and I don't think it starts directly. I think it starts culturally, because when certain people who have the most resources, aka power or money or whatever, you can replace it with anything, decide, they have this perception in their head of, okay, this person or these things or this idea is right. So in this case, white supremacy is correct. And so it just continuously manifests different things. I mean, Black people, our circumstances have not changed significantly since 1940. There is in America, at least. I'm not a specialist in the UK, but I understand the US very well. It hasn't changed much. And it's because of cultural violence. However, South Africa definitely changed because that cultural violence hasn't been addressed. You know what I mean? And so I think, and also too, look at the Jewish example. When the whole thing with the Holocaust happened, a lot of the cultural violence was addressed, which is why, like, there is no tolerance. Like, anti-Semitism is highly, highly policed. Highly, like, look at Germany. You can't buy Mein Kampf in Germany. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can watch Birth of a Nation, which is the KKK's movie version of Mein Kampf, and you can buy that in the United States very easily. You know what I'm saying? And that's, and like they think about not just like movies, films, and TV, like having minimum people in certain positions. You know what I mean? Like, and like even with women, I mean, the fact that I always say that there's so many white males making the decisions for people with vaginas is wow. You know what I mean? And it's a culturally violent idea that, you know, it's okay for men to decide the fate of a woman's body, you know, but it's not, as we know, as you and I can both agree. But but no one has ever stopped and dealt with that culturally violent norm to that extent. People who are in positions of power, or every single small, like, you know, interaction. I think. I think it's a little dot.
Oh, cool. So everything that you've just said in terms of like it being like we've got to address the culture side of everything. How do we go about that? Is it what we're doing right now? Is it the conversations? Is it people voicing at our level?
That's one part. But it's also just I think at the people in power also need to address the cultural things, you know, or just like checking how they talk about hearing people, or like low-coded language, you know, like aggressive or calling people thugs, you know, that should be illegal, or that should be seen as bad. Like, it's just every single person, grassroots or, you know, top up or bottom down, both need to be committed to dealing with it. That's the thing. I don't know how it's going to happen. I mean, obviously some people in power, I generally don't know how to convince people, white men in power, to care about cultural violence. Like, I don't have the answer to that yet. But I mean, everyday people, it's more of just and also to just not supporting people who perpetuate cultural violence. So for example, like, I do not stream anything Kardashian. I will not give them a penny. I will not give them a dime unless they are willing to admit their contribution to erasing Black female bodies. I won't. You won't get anything from me. You know, and I think that's also a thing, like, who do you buy from? I mean, a lot of, like, for example, Topshop, very, very racist CEO. Urban Outfitters, very, very racist CEO. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I know. I don't want any other one, but you see what I'm saying? Like, it's those kind of things. People have to be really committed to, like, really thinking about who you're giving your money to, especially in a capitalist system. Like, obviously, because capitalism works because racism and capitalism are very embedded. People, I mean, I am on the socialist Marxist side of that, so I admit I have that bias, but whether if I did it or not, they are, you know, correlated with each other insidiously. And so you need to think about who are buying from Black-owned people. A very good way to get rid of cultural violence. You know what I'm saying? When you buy your child a book, think of it, most children's books have only white characters.
Yeah.
Only white characters. Buy books with Muslim characters, you know, and black characters, and really just giving them a diverse things, giving them dolls to play with that are black and white and Asian and all kinds of races, because it automatically normalizes that there is no norm for beauty or norm for what is standard. You know what I mean? Those kind of things, you know?
Yeah. That's really good.
It's small, it's like the small things like that, or like, or just like even your art. Like in our house, we realized like we had like 3 pictures of white dudes in our house, and we're like, what? White? You know, there's not a white straight man in this house. I'm confused. We're like, this is not okay. We're like, this has to go. Yeah. You know, so things like that.
Yeah. Awareness, right? Awareness to yourself and what's around you.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Yeah.
But I mean, also, I'm sure there's more, but I mean, I don't know, that's all I have for now.
Yeah, there's so much tea that I'd like. There's words that I wanted to go into and what terminology we're using, but we'll save that for another day. Maybe we can we'll do something more with this, and it's been so
I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I love talking about this. It's super important. I mean, like I said before, like I work with NGO, like my last NGO job, like I worked for a diplomacy agency, and I had to convince diplomats why they should care about their black populations.
Yeah.
Tiring. Okay, but at least you listen. So it's like, I mean, I've done it for free for hours and sheds, so I can do it here. So
perfect. Yeah. It's been so good to speak to you, T, and I'm so glad that we've had this conversation.
No, me too, and especially that it's recorded and other people can hear it and see it, and just like more knowledge, you know, can be put out, I think.
Yeah. And it's true, like the amount of conversations that I've had this week, and I guess I'll go to say maybe I'm feeling uncomfortable, because it's the word that I'm using at the moment. But the more I'm having them, the more it's just becoming the norm. And that's what needs to happen, right? Like you can refer it to so many different aspects of your life, but right now it's comfortable. And as long as both sides understand that it's okay to mess up, and maybe the wrong terminology might be used, or you say something that might be offensive but you don't realize it, like the innocent ignorance is
exactly, which is why like I had this conversation, because like, you know, because I will say what I have to say explicitly. I'm not going to hold back what I have to say, but I don't cut people out or don't allow them to reciprocate or rebuttal or explain themselves either, because at the end of the day, an ally, if someone's an ally, like there's Herbert Marcuse, he's a neo-Marxist, he said that you may not like your allies, but they're your allies. Your comrades is a term he used as a Marxist. But he said, you may not like your comrades, but those are the ones you have. You know, and so anyone who's willing, for at least for me, who's willing to do the work, I'm willing to be forgiving. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think we can leave it on that. That's for sure. Definitely leave it with that.
Yes, of course. Thank you for